Hi, I'm Cary Herzberg. This is the Myopia Mindset, and this is a preview into a bonus episode that the paid supporters of the Myopia Mindset get each and every month. And if you are considering becoming a paid supporter of the Myopia Mindset, these bonus episodes, in addition to our extended versions of every episode we do, is our way of saying thank you for supporting everything we're doing here. My mission is to get the word out about myopia management and why it's the coolest thing in optometry, and in hopes that more ECPs can learn about it and start doing it. All right. Thank you so much to our paid supporters. Let's get to the episode.
The kind of a thing you want to look at your, the health of your practice in that situation, your overhead, how much money you're spending, your salaries that are going out. I mean, you might, if you're seeing a lot of these, if you have associates that are working with you, they're seeing a lot of patients, they're on a salary basis or whatever it is, profit sharing, whatever it is you got for them. All of this for a myopia management practice has to fit into that, and the thing I think the message here is that eventually I want our doctors and the colleagues to listen to is I want the other fit to happen. That's what happened for us. We actually took a practice that was trying to be everything and was taking vision care plans, and we took that down into a myopia only practice, basically, and did and especially contact lenses, and that's all we did. And we got down to a staff of 2 people and myself. We had to have a staff of 3 people taking care of this practice, which was netting as good as anybody out there. And I was only there 2/3 of the year. I wasn't there the whole year. Took a third of the year off to travel and educate. So I mean, it can be done, but you've got to be deliberate about this. I did a doctor came up to me at one of the meetings and we're talking, and he wanted to get started in myopia, and he was going to go and buy this practice to do that. And I said, have you looked at the patient age of the practice? Because, a myopia practice is a pediatric practice, right?
Right.
So he said, no, that I hadn't. That's a great point. I said, yeah, and then we went on to talk about other things, like you might be wanting to be located more closer to pediatricians and other medical professionals that deal with kids. You might want to be in an area that's younger populations, growing families that have kids, stuff like, it all happens, but it doesn't happen by accident.
Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure. There's ways that you can start to trim, right? Which works with the overweight analogy. Like find out where the waist is, find out where the practice is overweight essentially, and then begin to trim, make it more efficient. One of the ways you can do that, because you mentioned associate doctors, and from my own personal experience, I have been in practices with associate doctors. And I say, okay, let's go over your pitch. Let's talk about how you're going to talk about myopia management with the patient and their parents. And we go into this routine. We get it. I was like, okay, practice it. I like this part. This part works. We talk about all these different things for them. Then when we're done, I say, okay, now what are your associates saying? And they say, well, they're not saying anything. What do you mean they're not saying anything? Yeah. Well, they don't do the myopia management. It's like, okay, yes, but they should have a myopia management pitch, because it's just as important for them to source these patients as it is you. And that is one of the overweight areas, the waist. If your associates do not have a myopia management pitch, you need to start working with them and say, and communicate to them, this is why this is important. If we're going to do myopia management at this practice, if we're going to make this work, everybody's got to be on the same page with how this is being communicated.
Absolutely. You're absolutely well said. Yet you have to, I was going to make one illustration too on the point before. We moved from a shopping center kind of setting, high overhead, small space. Yeah. We moved into another space that had a lot of space, but it had just a single door. That's all my exposure was to the street. You remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
And we had
the scuba shop.
Yes. And we had that lasted for about 5 years, but we had all of our patients coming in to that location that was now, I quickly quadrupled my space. I didn't have much exposure, but it didn't make any difference. I already had the patient base that knew where I was and wanted my services, and they were going to follow. So you can get out of that high overhead space, basically. You need to, you need to get, what is, the point about a high overhead space is that it'll attract traffic and it'll build a practice quickly, hopefully. But the thing to realize is at some point you're not going to, it's time to move out of there. That you don't need, you can build your own building basically,
Yeah.
support yourself, which was on the way for that. But yes, if you're talking about a myopia mindset, you all need, well, you need to funnel it all. Even if you're the only one doing the myopia treatment, and the associates are working on general, they need to know that same stick. They need to be able to take that patient and say, we need to send you here. This doctor does what you need, and to point that out, so they all have to be on the same page. Absolutely. Well said.
Yeah, and to your point about space, I mean, I've been in so many practices where the room where the equipment is tiny. You have barely enough room to get in there and use the equipment, and I laugh about it every time, because I would go to a practice and they'd be like, okay, let me show you the space, let me show you the topographer, whatever. We go in, I'm like, oh, another really small equipment room filled with equipment.
Right.
And like, if you're going to take quality topography capture, you need room and opportunity to make that happen.
Right.
To your point about the other overweight aspect is, if you have the equipment, you need to be using it. And we're going to get into that next, but also you need to have the proper amount of space to do that. And I think this is a commonly overlooked thing, is like, if you're going to expect your staff or even yourself to take quality topography capture, like if you're like this, all hunched up, for the audio listeners, all hunched up with no elbow room, nowhere to move, nowhere to like see what's going on, nowhere to help the patient get into the proper alignment for the machine and take the images, like that's working against you, So
Right.
like space, as far as, carving out enough room to do that. If there's another piece of equipment that you can kind of take out of there and put in another part of the practice to give that topography machine, better elbow room, then maybe you do that,
So
especially,
we
go
had
ahead.
we had just I want doctors to think about this. At one time in my practice, I had three different topographers I was using.
Yeah, that's
All
right.
right. So
I
I mean,
remember.
yeah. So I mean, we had three topographers, and that shows you where. But that was where the emphasis was, and darn it, we used all of them,
Mm-hmm.
and we utilized them for different things. Um, so sometimes you have to even think about that with today, because there are there's not one answer to any question. If you're doing a lot of scleral lenses, maybe a Pentacam or an eaglet is a better choice. For ortho-k, maybe Medmont. Other choices. That the Topcons and the keratographs and others are. What I mean? There's different applications, or Scouts even. Different topographers do different things, so it's kind
Right.
of, and I found even with the like the state of the art, the Ferraris running around your practice as far as topographers,
Yeah.
they really take, they don't do everything as well. I mean, as strange as it might sound, there are
It's
topographers that
trade-offs.
do better job
Yeah.
at different things. So you're going to maybe end up with a couple different, and the good news about this is that they're going to pay for themselves. I mean, if you're into the
Mm-hmm.
specialty stuff, you won't even think twice about that investment because it's returning. The
Yeah.
problem is that when you have expensive equipment and like I said, you're doing, you know, we don't do glaucoma basically in our practice. You've got to really focus in on this and start to, unwind from the optometrist does everything model,
Right.
that you were taught in school, and then get down to what do you do? What do you
Right.
want to do? Hopefully it's myopia, but if it's not, then find that place that that you want to do. If it's in the medical field, whatever it is, find it. Do that for yourself, because that's where you're going to excel the best at
Mm-hmm.
doing what you love to do.
Yeah.
So
And an important thing to add to that, especially when it comes to a topographer, is make sure you like using it,
yeah,
you know? And
and
if you
use it.
don't, find one that does, and
Yeah,
if make the investment.
yeah,
I've been in so many practices where I don't even know if they have the thing turned on. And
yeah.
when
I
I
know.
talk to the staff, the techs, how does doctor feel about the topographer? It's not even on. And they're like, oh, she hates it or he hates it.
Yeah,
Why? Well, because of the following things. Or the staff doesn't like using it. Like, when I was working with Johnson and Johnson with the ability overnight, we were able to find better rates of success with a different topographer just because the staff liked using that one more, and they had put that one in a different location.
Oh
They had like
gosh.
3 locations or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
So they had a topographer that they had just gotten and the staff hated using it, and then they have the other one, the older one that the staff really felt more comfortable with. And I was like, what if we switched those? And they were like, okay. And then they started seeing better
Yeah.
success with ortho-k because the staff was more motivated to take captures.
And there's not going to be one final, if you do this right, there's not going to be one final topographer. You're
Yeah.
actually going to wear them out. You're actually going to
Yeah.
replace them with different models and newer ones and other things with, yes. So, you know, absolutely. You have to, but the thing is, you need to use them, right?
This is
Whatever.
what I want to get to
Yeah. The
next.
answer is you have to
Yeah.
use the equipment. Um, but anyway, as far as answering your question, so, we found that managing a myopia management practice didn't require the staffing that it did for these do all everything optometry practices, that you had. So you don't require as much staff, but the key thing then is to get the quality. We ended up picking the best of the best of the people as we downsized our staff and didn't downsize our net at all. So it's a key thing to remember, that is you're not going to need to, and a lot of times in a myopia management practice, you're going to be billing, but nothing like what you bill now. Nothing like, it's not even close. It's a very manageable thing. So so those are the kinds of things, to take a perspective on your practice, see where the money's going, basically, where you've invested. Hopefully you have a good profit margin. But like I said, if you're doing, vision care patients, then you're automatically, and the tough part about it is, with these vision care patients, is they'll tell you what their health care is supposed to be. You won't be telling, well, they said, well, I'm not eligible for an exam, or I'm not eligible for a pair of glasses, or whatever. They're basically managing their own, their vision care under basis of when they're eligible through the insurance. That's not how you want to do things. You're the doctor. You should be, it's time you should be changing your prescription, not because you have eligibility, but because it's time to change your prescription, or it's time to get some new contact lenses. The lucky thing about myopia management is the fact that you're going to be replacing these things routinely. It's part of the process, and you're going to be seeing the patient more often. So you're going to be talking about hopefully global fees. But first off, get your practice into shape where your profit margins are better, if you can. And like you said, again, if you're in a multi-doctor practice, make sure your associates or other doctors are trained. If you're the associate, make sure the boss knows how to, what you're doing here and getting patients to you.
Yeah, that's a great point. If you're the associate, which is the case for a lot of optometrists out there, especially those who are interested in myopia management, like I say all the time, if this is something you think you'd be into, if you can catch the bug, if you can get passionate, fall in love with myopia, you can bring in a new source of revenue to your practice that you're an associate at and really like make a difference. And I was interviewing Brianna Rue just recently, and she was talking about how you have to prove it. She's like, Brianna said, I was an associate doctor and I had to prove it to the practice owner that that this is worth investing in, that I can show up and do this. And I think that's an important part of it. If you're that associate doctor, this is a part of the overweight category. Is like, if you're like, I want to be the myopia management person. Like, let's say, you're practicing in a network, right? And there's several different locations. Maybe it's best to be like, I want to be the myopia management doc. I think we should do myopia management at this location. Send all your myopia patients to me.
Right.
Dr. So-and-so, she does dry eye. We're going to send all the dry eye patients over to her. And I have seen this work. I have seen, multi-location practice networks be like, oh, you do, like, this is dry eye. All right, well, that's it for this regular version of the episode, but the discussion doesn't stop here. It actually continues in an extended version of this episode, which is available to our Substack supporters. You can, if you're interested in getting the rest of the episode, consider becoming a paid supporter of the Myopia Mindset. In addition to an extended version of this episode and every other episode that we do, you'll also get access to exclusive monthly bonus episodes of the Myopia Mindset. And I know you're interested. You've made it this far. And what for the cost is $12 a month, which is basically the cost of a cup of coffee each and every week. And that's how I like to put it. Listen, if you would buy me a cup of coffee each and every week to nerd out about myopia, to bring on amazing guests, to spread the word about how awesome myopia management is and how more ECPs should be engaged in this specialty, then please consider becoming a paid supporter of the Myopia Mindset. You can do so on our Substack. myopiamindset.substack.com is how you do that. Thank you so much for your consideration. I'll see you at the next one.